Welcome back to part 2 of this video. So in part 1 we looked at the factorization of trinomials and we did number 1 and 2, so please go and watch that video before you watch this one. Alright, so very important, remember when we are checking for a trinomial, there is 2 conditions that has to be met. So the first is that it is in the correct form, so there's an x squared, there's an x, and then there's a constant. And the second thing is to make sure that there's no highest common factor. Alright, so let's have a look at number C. So the first thing, let's just check is this in the correct format. So there I have an x squared, there I have an x, and there I have a constant. Alright, so my first condition of it being in the correct form is met. Now my second thing is to make sure that there's no highest common factor. Alright, so there's nothing that can go into 6, 11, and 10. So there's no common factor, which means that is also done. Alright, so let's get to factorizing this. So the first thing you want to look at is your sign in front of your constant. So in front of my 10, I have a minus. So that means that one bracket has to have a positive and one bracket has to have a negative. That part is sorted. Now we go and get the factors. Alright, so what times what will give me 6? So I have 1 times 6 or 2 times 3. Then I do the same with my 10. So what times what will give me 10? So I have 1 times 10 and I have 2 times 5. Alright, so let's go and draw a table for myself. So I'm going to first use my 2 and 3 and I'm going to use my 2 and 5. Okay, this is based on trial and error, so if you see your first options does not work, you can always convert to your second options. Alright, so let's get started with this one. So I'm going to have a 2x and a 3x, and I'm going to have a 2 and a 5. Now we are going to take this and we are going to cross multiply, which means I'm going to say 2x times 5, which will give me 10x. And I'm going to say 3x times 2, which is 6x. Now remember, my one bracket has to be positive and my other one has to be negative. So let's see. 10x minus 6x will give me 4x. If I switch it around, so 6x minus 10x, then I'm getting negative 4x. However, I want minus 11x. So this combination is not going to work. Alright, so let's remove it so we can try something else. Alright, so instead of saying 2 and 5, let's swap them around. So let's make it 5 and 2. Alright, so now we're going to work out. So 2x times 2 is 4x. And then 3x times 5 is 15x. Just want to fix my table quickly. Alright, so now let's use the 2 factors we just now got. Alright, remember one has to be positive, one has to be negative. So doing that, I'm going to say 4x minus 15x, which is negative 12 or negative 11x. Okay, what was I looking for? I was looking for negative 11x, which means that this combination is correct. Now your last step is just to put it into brackets. So our top 2 terms goes into a bracket and our bottom 2 goes into a bracket. So this will leave me with 2x and a 5 and a 3x and a 2. Alright, so usually what I do is I take my first term and my last term and I multiply them together. So 2x times 2x will give me 4x. And when I did this, I saw my 4x had to be my positive number and my 15 has to be my negative number. And there we factorize it successfully. Alright, let's look at one last example. So number D, I'm giving you 15x squared minus 18x plus 3. Alright, so first things, we always have to check our conditions first. Alright, so my first condition Is this in the basic form? Alright, so I have an x squared, I have an x, and I have a constant. So my first condition is met. Now we look at our second condition, but is there any highest common factor? Alright, so looking at 15, 18, and 3, there's one thing they all have in common. All of them have a 3. Alright, so we're first going to take out a common factor. So let's take our 3. Then remember in your bracket is what is left. Alright, which basically means is you're going to take your first term, which was 15x squared, divided by what you took out, which was 3. Then you're going to do the same for your 18x, divided by 3, and then your last term, which is 3, divided by 3. Alright, so this will give me 5x squared minus 6x plus 1. It's not necessary to write down this step. Alright, this is just to show you how do you get rid of a common factor. How do you remove a common factor? Alright, so now let's refocus on this. Now that we don't have a common factor anymore, this here, let's just get another color. Okay, so this part here is in fact a trinomial. Okay, so let's solve it. Okay, I'm just going to rewrite it for now. So the first thing we have to do is we look at the sign in front of my constant. So the sign in front of my constant is a positive, which means both bracket has to be negative or both brackets has to be positive. Because I know this, I can go and look at this sign here, and because this is a negative, it means that both my brackets has to have a negative in it. Okay, now we can move on. So let's get the factors of 5. So that will only be 5 times 1. And the factors of 1 will just be 1 times 1. Alright, so let's go and put this into my table. So I have 5x and 1x. I have a 1 and a 1. And now all I have to do is cross multiply this. So I'm going to say 5x times 1, which gives me 5x. And I'm going to say x times 1, which gives me x. Now let's go and see if this combination will work. Remember, both signs has to be negative. So we're going to say negative 5x, negative 1x, which gives me negative 6x. What was I looking for? I was in fact looking for a negative 6x. So I know that this combination is correct. So I'm going to take my top 2 parts, put it into one bracket, and my bottom 2 parts and put that into another bracket. Alright, so this will then leave me with bracket 5x, 1, and x and a 1 in my second bracket. And remember, both signs were negative, so it will be negative, negative, and there you did it. You successfully factorized.